Watch Bloomberg's special Earnings Watch coverage throughout earnings season, only on Bloomberg Television.
Well, gasoline prices this summer averaging $3 a gallon nationwide for regular unleaded, a few cents higher a year ago, according to AAA. That amounts to more than $200 to fill a 75-gallon fuel tank of a recreational vehicle, and even more money for RVs with larger tanks. How are these higher gasoline prices impacting the RV industry this summer vacation season? For that, we turn to Richard Kuhn. He's president of the Recreational Vehicle Industry Association. He's in Reston, Virginia, at an RV park. Thanks for joining us today, Mr. Kuhn. And let me get your sense about this. You are the president of the association. How is business these days in light of the higher gasoline prices?
Well, it's actually, Monica, very good. The last 5 years, the industry has seen record-breaking years, despite gasoline prices going up every year. So business is good. Let
me get your sense about the typical owner of an RV.
Typical owner of an RV, what is he like?
Yeah, like the typical statistics.
I wish there was such a thing as a typical owner of an RV. You'd have to say the average age of an RVer is about 49 years old. Typically makes income of about $68,000 a year on average, and loves the outdoors.
Let me get your sense. I mean, different type of RVs. We're seeing some video of it now. I mean, you have really the big mega-sized RVs that, you know, people can live in for days or months. What are some of the other types? We're seeing a few versions here.
Yes, there's all types of RVs for all kinds of folks. Probably you're seeing recreational vehicles that are trailer pulled, or that are travel trailers that are pulled by trucks or SUVs. Those are usually the less expensive units, all the way up to the big units like the ones that are behind me. They're called Class A motorhomes. So there's a price range for typically every family.
So how are people adjusting to the higher gasoline prices? Are they doing anything in particular from what you're seeing in the trends?
Yes, they're you know, all of us are impacted by our gasoline prices. Every segment of the industry, that travel industry, is impacted, whether you're flying or taking a bus or going in an RV. What RV folks are doing is adjusting by typically going shorter distances on their travels and staying longer in the campgrounds. In other words, they don't go to quite as many places as they normally would.
Let me get your other sense, because we've been talking about higher food prices this hour. I mean, all of that seems to be impacting consumers overall. So same thing, people just changing and shifting some of the ways that they use their RV?
Yes, they do adjust it, like I mentioned to you, staying longer and going shorter distances. But what's interesting is our surveys show that RV folks that own them are actually using their RVs more this year than they did last year. It's actually up. And one of the other statistics pretty interesting is they're eating in more. They're staying and eating in their RV versus eating out. They're eating less outside, going to less expensive restaurants also.
Yeah, maybe because of those higher prices, as we talked about earlier in our show, rising inflation in food. Right. Let me get your sense also about sales. Are they at a record now? Where would you put them?
Well, last year, the year ended with the highest sales in since 30 years now. So record sales this quarter, or this century, has been typical the last number of years. We sold wholesaled out 390,000 plus units last year, and expect to do nearly that this year.
And what's the outlook? You say more of that, and again, is it the baby boomer, or is it moving to younger families as well?
Yeah, it's both, Monica. Interestingly enough, the fastest growing segment of our industry happens to be the 35-year and under segment. A lot of that's because the manufacturers have catered to the types of products, the different types of products that attract younger people. Our basic market, however, is the baby boomer. It's that 50-year-old and older. And of course, as you know, the numbers of the baby boomers continue to grow. So the outlook for the market is very positive over the next 10 years still.
And I guess designs have changed also. Are they making it more attractive, I guess, for that younger family?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is that very type of thing. One of the new units that are out is called a sports utility trailer, and the back end of it flops down where you can drive your four-wheel vehicles or your motorcycles or your snowmobiles, and just like an extra garage, and take it with you, and that really caters to the younger generation.
Okay, we're going to talk more with Mr. Kuhn right after this. We'll continue our conversation with Richard Kuhn about RVs and some of the trends that we're seeing in that particular industry. We'll be right back. $142,000 in wages and benefits. That compares to $93,000 for Toyota's non-union workers at its U.S. plants. Well, let's get back to talking about RVs and the open road. Richard Kuhn is the president of the Recreational Vehicle Industry Association. Richard, before the break, we were talking a little bit about the design and that appeal to many of the younger families. And you mentioned something about, them being able to pull up their motorcycles and snowmobiles. What about it? Has RVing become a year-round thing?
Well, I wouldn't say overall it's year-round. Most people use it strictly in the summer to do summer vacations, but there are more and more folks that can use them in the wintertime. If you look at these units behind me, they're equipped to go in the wintertime. If you choose to do that, a lot of them are insulated pretty well, and they can travel all over the country during the winter. A lot of people use them to go skiing out west and in the east.
Now, we did talk about before the break some of the impacts of gasoline and, of course, higher food prices. But what about the weather? Across the country, we've seen storms and flooding. Has that impacted RV use in any way?
Not that we know of. Weather, of course, happens all the time every year, and unfortunately, none of us can predict that. So I think when people plan their vacations, during the winter when they're planning with their children where to go, they don't let the weather stop them when it comes up unless there's a big disaster somewhere. They just, they can't predict it, so they still go. And the equipment's very waterproof, obviously. The reason you have that equipment is so you can spend it outdoors. So it does very well in tough weather.
All right, Richard Kuhn, thanks so much. Richard Kuhn, the president of the Recreation Vehicle Industry Association, joining us from Reston, Virginia. Well, another check of world and national news is coming up. We'll also have a preview of what's coming up on Monday.